All right. This is going to be a quick recap, and I'm not going to spend too much time on the left hand because we're mostly working on right. But since we had a question about diminishes, this will all come full circle. So, our D major, when we're playing this, if we had D major, there's two sharps in the key of D. One is F sharp, one is C sharp. So, D major, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A major, B minor. Then my next note in between B minor and in between D, so I have a C, is going to be a C sharp diminished. And it's going to sound like that. Now what it comes down to, if we were in the key of C, we would have C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, it's the fifth, A minor, and then B diminished, which looks a lot like the G7 because it is the same chord. If I've got the B, F, and G with the with the G, that means that it is a diminished chord. If I move that up and have this, I obviously have to move this G to a G sharp. So this is a B diminished, this is a C diminished, this is a C sharp diminished, this is a D diminished. And what we do, the seventh note, the diminished note, is a lending tone or a leading tone. So in C, it's easy to hear. La, it resolves, yeah, it falls down. Or la, no matter what I'm singing, it'll always make sure that it always is that lead-in. The only difference between a diminished chord and a diminished seventh chord is, guess what? That's seventh. So in the key of C, if we're going to have our B diminished, you've got to open G. But if we wanted to have a B diminished seventh, we would change our phrasing to have this G7, the B diminished, played in the second phrasing. So our G major, we would have with our D, B with the bookend, and then our G. If we take our first finger off, we put our second finger where our first finger was, our third finger where our second was, and put our pinky on the fretboard, we still get a G major, G major, G major. Same thing with G7. G7, we have got a B, F, and a G. So if we take off of our first finger, put our second finger where our first finger was, put our third finger where our second was, and pull our pinky on, we still have that G7, yeah? But in this case, in C, D, E, F, G, we already have a G, so we can't say C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, G7, C. We say C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C. So if we were to go to D, or C sharp major, D sharp minor, E sharp minor, F sharp major, G sharp major, A sharp minor, C sharp diminished, and C sharp. If you go up and do the same thing, D major, E minor, F sharp major, G major, A major, B minor, C sharp diminished to D. What you're doing is you're just moving that backwards triangle shape of the G7, which in this case is the C sharp diminished, up. The difference between this with this note is adding this note for a C sharp minor, or C sharp diminished. And the reason why it's weird is a diminished chord is actually a diminished major major, okay? And then a dominant diminished would be a C sharp major minor. And the reason why is you're adding the increments of a major increment interval, 1, 2, 3, and a 1, 2, 3, a minor third. Major third and a minor third together make up the difference between what we're looking at. So when I want to get a, let's say, B diminished 7, I play the G7 looking chord, but I also add down the G sharp. What that does is that goes between the major diminished to a minor diminished. And what we end up getting left with is this chord, which resolves into the next chord. So let's say we were in the key of E. E has 4 sharps. One is F sharp, one is C sharp, one is G sharp, and one is D sharp. The way I know that is because one, memorization, and two, 5 notes away from the key I'm starting with, I keep adding the sharps starting with F. C, no sharps, no flat. I've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. If I alter that and I go C, D, E, F, G, and I take away my second and my fourth, and I've got C, E, G, for me to add a 7th, I would be basically adding the 7th tone, the B. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. So my B is my 7th tone. So a C major add 7 sounds like this. That is my C major, or my C dominant 7, because I have the B flat in there. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. It also would be my secondary movement for the C major. So C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished. If I were to play that B diminished not using these 3 fingers, but using all my fingers and making this chord with these fingers and add that, I would have my diminished 7th. And you'll notice 99% of the time, players of the ook play the diminished chords as a diminished 7th. Only a rare few can hear the difference between that 1%, 99 of the diminished 7th and the diminished. Which one is a diminished major major? One is a diminished major minor. And we can talk about that next week, but that's kind of a little recap. So how do you remember what's what though? You just slide the shape around so it has the root of the chord within it. So if we were going to be playing like a C diminished 7, C diminished 7 is the only diminished 7 that actually has the note C in it as the chord note. So if F diminished is the only one with an F note, G diminished is the only one with a G note. So if you're going to go through this and you hear like this, that's my B diminished, right? This one would be the only one that actually has that B note. Right? So if I move this up to here, that is my C diminished. So basically you're taking the tone that we're in, C major, keeping that finger there, and making the backwards chord and adding on your 7th. And that's how you grab that. And then honestly, don't be confused between the diminished and the diminished 7th chord. The only difference is one is a stacking of a major interval, and one is a stacking of a major minor interval. For a full set of these chords, what you could do is see how you could augment chords as well, but that isn't closely related to diminished. That's the next step after expressing what diminished are. So diminished 7ths only get used when you're using them as a leading tone to lend itself to fall into another thing during a melody, or to have the chordal change move itself. So sometimes you're using the 7 of 5. So in the key of C, my 5th is G, my 7th of G is F sharp. So if I magically replace my B for an F sharp, that means I can modulate into G if I wanted to and use the same melody, same structure and everything. But we can get into that later. I hope any of this helps. If it was just whoop right over the top, I'll just throw you some practical applications of how C and a G7 would be having a C major and a B diminished. When you play the B diminished with your first fingerings, not using the pinky, it's a major diminished. When you play the same diminished using that, but you add this down here, you're adding the 7th tone, and that is a diminished 7th tone. In the key of D, D major, E minor, F sharp major, G major, A major, B minor, C sharp diminished, C sharp diminished. I prefer the latter, not the former. But it just depends on what I'm playing through. All right, have fun moving that through, and I'll see you in a week after. Aloha!